It began on a blistering hot afternoon when I returned from a veterans outreach meeting to find 2 county deputies parked across my front yard, their lights flashing as if I had committed a crime. My wife stood on the porch, her arms crossed protectively, her eyes furious yet frightened. And in the center of it all, leaning smugly against her golf cart decorated with HOA decals she had no right to display, stood Karen. She was waving a stack of papers in the air as though they were holy scripture, her shrill voice piercing the heavy air. "This house is in violation of zoning," she screamed. "It needs to be moved or demolished immediately. Officers, do your job." I froze for a moment, stunned by the absurdity of it. Move my house? The home I had built on land my grandfather purchased with blood-earned wages after serving in World War II. It was laughable, except nothing about the situation was funny. The deputies looked uneasy, their hands resting on their belts, clearly caught between a screeching HOA tyrant and the calm defiance radiating from my wife. That was the shocking Beganinga woman so drunk with false power that she had convinced law enforcement to treat my home like an illegal shed. The truth was simple. Karen had tried everything else first. Letters citing non-existent rules, fines for aesthetic disruption, threats of liens she had no legal standing to enforce. All because my home, a craftsman-style ranch with a flagpole and garden beds, sat outside her HOA jurisdiction. She hated that I had refused to join her association, hated that my independence exposed the limits of her power. So when paperwork and intimidation failed, she escalated to calling in the sheriff's department, spinning lies about zoning violations and illegal construction. As one deputy stepped forward to speak with me, I could see doubt in his eyes. He wasn't convinced by Karen's shrieking, but he had been dispatched, and duty required him to ask. "Sir," he began, "we've had reports this property was built without proper clearance. We'll need to inspect." But before he could finish, Karen cut him off, shoving her stack of papers at him. "Don't just inspect. Remove it. Tear it down. He's defying community law." Her face was flushed, sweat glistening as if fury itself kept her alive. I could have argued right then, could have produced the land deed signed in 1947, the building permits issued by the county clerk's office, the decades of tax receipts. But instead, I reached calmly into my wallet, my hand steady though my blood was boiling. I flipped open the leather case, the badge gleaming in the late sun. A hush fell over the scene. My badge wasn't from the county, nor the state it bore the seal of the United States government. 22 years of service as a federal investigator, retired but still recognized, had left me with authority Karen could neither touch nor comprehend. The deputies stiffened immediately, their tones shifting from suspicion to respect. "Sir, apologies," the lead officer said, his eyes flicking toward Karen now with irritation rather than obedience. Karen's smugness drained in real time, her jaw slackening as though she had seen a ghost. She tried to backpedal, waving her papers less confidently. He can't just lying. That's not real, it's probably fake." But one deputy asked to see the documents she carried, and within seconds her entire charade crumbled. The official orders she had been waving, they weren't government-issued notices at all. They were HOA violation slips she had typed up herself, stamped with a fake seal she'd printed from a home computer. That was when my wife stepped forward, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "You endangered my family with a false report. You abused the trust of these officers. And you tried to destroy the one thing generations of our family have built. Enough is enough." Her words carried across the street, where neighbors had begun to gather, phones raised to record the spectacle. For years they had endured Karen's reign of intimidation. Now, with her scam exposed under flashing red and blue lights, their silence broke into murmurs of outrage. But the twist that made the confrontation unforgettable came from an unexpected source. An older man emerged from the crowd. Mr. Edwards, a quiet widower who rarely left his house. He carried a worn leather folder, his hands trembling as he opened it. "I know that badge," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I served with his father in the Pacific. This land was promised, protected by grants for veterans. I still have the documents to prove it." He held up papers yellowed with age, the county seal stamped clear as day. The crowd gasped. Karen's lie hadn't just collapsed, it had been buried beneath the weight of history itself. The deputies wasted no more time. They informed Karen she was under investigation for filing false reports, impersonating legal authority, and harassment. Her face contorted, desperate, as she sputtered excuses. "I was protecting the community. He's a fraud. You can't do this to me." But it was too late. They read her rights right there on the lawn she had tried so hard to control, cuffing her wrists as neighbors cheered. Her collapse wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. The implosion of a bully who believed she could bend the world to her will, only to be undone by her own arrogance. As she was loaded into the patrol car, the neighborhood erupted. Some clapped, others shouted their grievances, airing years of pent-up fury. One mother yelled, "You fined me for my kids' toys on the porch." Another father shouted, "You threatened to tow my truck." The chorus of accusations was overwhelming, drowning out Karen's last shrill protests as the door slammed shut behind her. That night, the community gathered at my home, not in fear but in unity. We sat around the porch, sharing food, laughter, and relief. The oppressive shadow Karen had cast was gone, and in its place grew a resolve to never allow such tyranny again. Ethan, my teenage son, looked up at me and said, "Dad, I've never seen her scared before." I smiled, squeezing his shoulder. That's because bullies collapse when faced with truth they can't control. And yet, as proud as I was to see justice served, I couldn't shake the thought of how close we had come to disaster. All it took was one false call, one set of forged papers, and officers could have torn apart what my family had built. The lesson was clear and sobering. Power is dangerous when wielded without conscience, but even the most arrogant tyrant can be stopped when truth stands firm. So I ask you now, after everything, do you believe Karen got what she deserved? Or was her downfall too little compared to the damage she caused? Share your thoughts, because justice is never finished until the people decide what is truly right and wrong. The patrol car carrying Karen hadn't even turned the corner when the neighborhood seemed to erupt into 1,000 unspoken sighs of relief. For years she had clung to her imaginary throne, barking orders, sending letters, fining people into fear. But now her crown had fallen in the most public way possible, handcuffed, flower-faced, with her forged papers clutched uselessly in the back seat of a sheriff's cruiser. The air itself felt lighter, as if a storm had finally broken. Yet I knew the fight wasn't over. A woman like Karen didn't shrivel quietly in the dark. She would lash out, fight tooth and nail, and drag everyone else down with her. What I didn't realize was just how deep her web of lies ran, or how much she had to lose once the spotlight of justice was fixed firmly on her. The very next morning my phone buzzed endlessly with reporters calling, bloggers messaging, and even veterans I had served with sending messages of support. Molina, the plainclothes sergeant who had once recorded Karen's antics on her lawn, forwarded me a link. The local news had picked up the story, and the headline alone was damning. HOA president arrested for forged orders and false reports. Photos of her cuffed on my front lawn spread like wildfire, and soon Karen's name was on every neighbor's lips, not as an authority figure but as a cautionary tale. But the twist came from the county courthouse. Within 48 hours, prosecutors announced they were expanding the charges. Not just harassment, not just filing false reports. They now had evidence of embezzlement, tens of thousands siphoned out of HOA accounts into shell companies run by Karen's relatives. Landscaping contracts that never saw a single blade of grass touched. Security patrol invoices paid to her brother-in-law. Even travel receipts labeled as community improvement research that matched dates of her Caribbean vacations. Neighbors gasped as the truth came out, one revelation after another. Families who had struggled to pay inflated HOA dues realized their sacrifices had gone to fund Karen's luxuries. Mothers who'd scraped to cover unjust fines saw the money rerouted to jewelry stores and high-end restaurants. Rage bubbled over into fury, and petitions circled to dissolve the HOA entirely. When court day arrived, the room was packed wall to wall, a sea of neighbors in plain clothes facing the one woman who had once controlled them all. Karen shuffled in, shackled at the wrists, her arrogance cracked but not completely gone. She still tried to sneer, still tried to mutter about conspiracies. But the evidence towered too high, and her voice sounded smaller each time. The prosecutor laid it out like a meticulous autopsy. False documents, fraudulent seals, misappropriated funds, harassment campaigns, and the reckless stunt she had pulled against my family. Each piece was punctuated with testimony from neighbors who had suffered. An elderly widow described how Karen threatened to foreclose on her home over lawn violations. A single mother recounted the humiliation of police knocking on her door after Karen falsely reported child neglect. And then came Mr. Edwards, holding up his wartime documents again, his voice trembling but fierce. Her lies tried to erase sacrifices made by veterans. That cannot stand. The room erupted in applause, and even the judge had to bang the gavel to quiet the storm. And then it was my turn. I stood at the witness stand, the badge gleaming at my side, my voice carrying the weight of years of service. I didn't rant. I didn't curse. I simply told the truth of what happened that day: the flashing lights, the forged orders, the deputies ready to enforce a lie. I told them how my wife had stood bravely despite fear, how my neighbors had watched, how my badge wasn't a weapon but a shield against tyranny. I ended with one sentence that seemed to echo through the chamber: no homeowner should need a federal badge to live free from a neighbor's lies. That was when the courtroom shifted. What had begun as a trial for fraud and harassment turned into something larger: a referendum on unchecked HOA power, on the dangers of letting small tyrants wield big sticks. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras rolled, and the people in the gallery nodded, their eyes shining with vindication. When Karen's lawyer tried to paint her as misunderstood, even pitiable, the jury didn't flinch. They had seen the recordings, the forged seals, the bank transfers. They had heard the testimonies of children frightened, elders bullied, families shaken. Sympathy had no place in that room. The verdict came quickly: guilty on all counts. The judge's words cut through Karen's last desperate protests like a blade. You sought power not to serve but to control. You forged authority, endangered lives, and corrupted a community. Today that ends. With that, he sentenced her to 15 years in state prison, with restitution owed to every family she had defrauded. Her collapse was complete. She wailed, tried to lunge, tried to blame everyone but herself, but the deputies dragged her away. Her crown was gone forever. The weeks after her sentencing felt like waking into a new dawn. The HOA board voted unanimously to dissolve, replaced by a volunteer community council with transparent records. Neighbors once divided by fear now gathered for block parties, shared meals, and projects. They planted a garden in the old HOA office lot, each flowerbed a testament to resilience. And right at the center, my wife placed a small wooden plaque that read, "Truth grows here." But the most powerful moment came on Veterans Day. The community invited me to speak, not as a badge holder, not as a witness, but as a neighbor. I stood on the steps of the community center, Ethan at my side, and told them that what we had endured wasn't just about one tyrant. It was about remembering that power means nothing without integrity, and that silence in the face of lies is complicity. The applause that followed wasn't just for might, was for all of us who had stood up, finally, together. And yet, even in the victory, I carried a sobering truth. If I hadn't had that badge, if I hadn't been able to show them authority they couldn't ignore, my home could have been demolished, my family left in ruin. The system itself was vulnerable, too easily swayed by a loud lie. That reality haunted me, but it also fueled me to act. With neighbors' support, I began pushing for local reform laws, making it illegal for HOAs to file enforcement actions without county verification. Within months, the ordinance passed, a safeguard that would outlive us all. When I walk past the mural painted on the community center wall now, I see Karen's silhouette not as a person but as a shadow being banished, and beside it the outline of a badge gleaming with light. Underneath are words chosen by the neighbors themselves: "No lie can stand against truth united." And so I ask you, reader, was justice enough? Did Karen's collapse match the years of harm she caused? Or do you believe her punishment should have gone even further? Share your thoughts, because the line between right and wrong isn't drawn by titles or badges, it's drawn by people willing to speak up, no matter the cost.